Welcome back folks, my name's Shane. In today's video I'm going to answer the question whether or not you should buy the S5 Mark II kit with the 20 to 60mm f3.5 to 5.6 lens, or if you should just get the body and save up for another lens. Now there's a few factors that really goes into this decision, and also the price. I kind of think for $300 more you're getting a very capable lens, especially if you're a video shooter. Like the rest of the S series lenses, we get a 67mm filter thread, so if you buy any primes for the same series, like the 18, 24, 35, 50 or 85, you'll only need one ND filter. I think this is awesome. On this side of the lens, we get our autofocus manual focus switch. We get a nice big zoom ring, and it really gives you a lot of grip to work with, and a really great feeling focus ring. Panasonic have made this a video first lens, so if you're a video shooter, I think there's a lot of merit and value in this lens, considering how cheap you can add it into a kit with a camera body. While it doesn't have a constant aperture, we do get weather sealing as well. So if you plan on shooting with this in challenging environments, you've pretty much got yourself a one and done lens. Weight-wise, this comes in at only 350 grams, which is a whole lot nicer in the hand than something like the Sigma 24-70, which is a fantastic lens, but man, that weighs a ton. I really think this complements the smaller form factor of the S5 and S5 Mark II. When it comes to handling, this lens balances beautifully on both the S5 and S5 Mark II. My only complaint though with the handling has to do with the zoom ring. I find it just a little bit too tight. So if I'm shooting handheld and I'm doing video, if I turn it, I sometimes find myself wobbling the camera side to side. Now, this one has loosened up slightly, but it took about a year. And the one that I'm shooting this with is far too tight to use handheld, and I find myself accidentally just nudging side to side as I zoom in and out. So it does loosen up, but it just takes some time. If you're someone who likes the really tight zoom ring experience, you'll get a kick out of this, but it will take some time to loosen up depending on how often you use it. If you just plant it on a tripod like I do, it's going to take forever. If you're using it as your daily driver, then of course it's going to loosen up a little bit more, but it's never too loose. This is one of the great things about it. The focus ring feels amazing on this lens. If you're coming from micro four thirds, it's a huge step up over something like the Panasonic 12 to 35mm f2.8, which is one of my favorite video lenses, but the focus ring on this is on a whole other level. It is focused by wire, but you get a lot more purchase on this ring. It feels better under the fingers, and it's just a heck of a lot more consistent. Now, if you like to shoot manually, this lens is compatible with the S5 and S5 Mark II's linear focus option, which allows you to get repeatable and reliable focus pulls. Within the linear focus options, it allows us to decide how many degrees we need to turn the focus ring to go from minimum to infinity focus. If you've never been a huge fan of a focus by wire lens, I don't blame you, but having this manual focus experience really changes the game. This linear focusing option really makes this kit lens feel like a far more premium lens, as we can turn focus repeatably and reliably. We get a minimum focusing distance of only 15 centimeters, which is fantastic. So if you want to do any type of product photography or get up close to a flower, whatever the case may be, you can do that without any problems at all. Now, if you need to get in even tighter, you can switch over to APS-C crop mode, giving us that 1.5 times crop, allowing us to get right in and close to whatever it is you're shooting. Now, while this kit lens doesn't have any optical image stabilization, it still makes for a really great vlogging lens, especially if you're shooting with the S5 Mark II. We get that new active IS technology giving us really stable footage, and I think f3.5 is the sweet spot between blurring out a little bit of the background, but also showing you a little bit about how beautiful this is. There's ducks and turtles and stuff all over the place, and here's one right now. Can you see it, or is it Tone? Yeah, it's not my joke. You could vlog at f1.8, but you know, when it looks this nice, why would you want it? Let's talk video autofocus performance. Now, with the S5's new phase hybrid autofocus, I'm getting extremely fast, snappy, and reliable autofocus. And this is what I'm using the entirety of this video with no custom settings or anything like that. Just plonk this lens on the camera body, hit record, and you get these kind of great results. Now, turn on human tracking and the autofocus will be super reliable even at a distance. Let's switch it over to the original S5. And now we're over to the original S5. For this camera, I like to shoot with 1 area plus mode. It's one of the options in the menu system, and then I turn on human tracking with body detection, and these are the kind of results we can get shooting in vlog at 25 frames per second, 4K. So let's go back again. I used to use this lens a lot on this camera anytime I was out in the park, because the autofocus performance was far better than my GH cameras at the time. Up until the GH6, This was by far Panasonic's best autofocusing camera. Now, as you can probably see in those autofocus tests, the original S5 is nowhere near as fast as the new S5 Mark IIX, and that's because each camera body has different technology. It shares the contrast DFD, but the S5 Mark II has phase hybrid autofocus, which means it has phase detection points mixed with that AI tracking, and it works far better. But if you just plan on standing in a shot like this and letting the autofocus do the work, the original S5 paired with this kit lens will do a great job. Another huge benefit to this kit lens is the lack of focus breathing. This is where the edges of the frame will zoom in and out depending on how close you are to the lens. Now on some lenses, if I did this, I would lose up to 14% of my field of view, but not with any of the Panasonic S series lenses, including this kit lens. So if you're a video shooter and you don't want to have to get a digital crop to get rid of focus breathing, the S series, or this kit lens in this case, makes a whole lot of sense. The 20-60 kit lens is also Parfocal, which means if you lock focus manually, you can zoom in and out and it won't change the focus point. Again, this is a really handy tool if you plan on shooting manually in video mode. All right, I'm back in the studio shooting at 35mm f4.5. Now, usually in the studio here, I'd be using this 35mm f1.8, which gives me far more background separation. But it's not just about that either. I've had to crank the ISO of the camera up to 1250 as opposed to 250. So that's the benefit of a fast lens. You can run your ISO much lower and you also get way more subject separation. But background blur is overused and it's annoying sometimes. So nothing wrong with the look of this in my opinion. I think it looks nice and sharp. There's enough background blur like this. It will do the job. And if you're coming from micro four thirds, just getting into full frame, you'll probably still appreciate the amount of subject separation you can get. But it does look better at the wider end, or at least you don't have to run the ISO as high. Usually anytime I travel, I take this lens with me because it's really a great outdoor run and gun lens. You can vlog with it. You can do follow shots really well. It's also a lens I now use to shoot my show when I visit guitar shops because it allows me at 20mm to still see a lot of what's going on in the background, but still get a really professional look without being too blurry. Mid last year, I shot a series of videos overseas at f1.4. I really regret doing that. This is where f3.5 would have made the world of difference in hindsight, but it is what it is. 3.5 won't be for everybody, but 20mm is extremely functional. I thought it might be handy for folks who are in a studio to compare the kit lens up against a prime in this exact situation. So let's switch it over to the 35. And now you're looking at the 35mm f1.8 at 1.8. I'm also now at ISO 250 as opposed to being at 1250 that you just saw before. Let's switch it back. And back to the kit lens. Have a look at the difference now. I'm back at ISO 1250. Can you see a massive difference? Let's switch it back. And back to the 35mm f1.8. Now you might be asking, why can't I just move the camera in and set this one up at 20mm? It's still too wide and the look is vastly different. In this particular studio, 35mm is the way to go, which kind of brings me to my point. If you're just getting started, this lens makes so much sense for a number of different reasons. It allows you to find the sweet spot for your studio, and then you can go ahead and get a prime lens if you so choose. I think this really shines anywhere from 20 to 35mm, and then it just starts getting a little bit too dark for my liking, especially in the studio where I would just shoot primes. But on the wider end, even up to 35mm, you can make this work in a studio and get a very competent look. While this is a great little video lens, it's also pretty good for photography. Now, I'm not a pro photographer, and if I wanted the best results, I would buy a prime that meets my requirements. But for just getting started or travel photography, this is great. Being outdoors and being able to get a super wide angle 20mm or get a portrait shot, whatever the case may be, this is a very versatile lens, and used in the right scenarios, I think you'll get great results. All right, let's answer the question. So if you're thinking about getting an S5 Mark II or S5 Mark IIX, should you get this 20 to 60mm kit lens? I think it's an overwhelming yes. This is a really functional lens, and if you're just getting started with the L mount or full frame or an interchangeable lens camera, it will teach you which focal lengths are the most useful for you, and then down the track you can always get a prime lens to use it in a dedicated setup, much like how I'm using the 35mm f1.8 prime. I know now that it works because I started with this kit lens. But anytime I'm shooting outdoors where I want to showcase just how beautiful a park is, or if I'm shooting a show and I don't want to blur out the background to the nth degree, that's where a lens like this makes a whole lot of sense. I actually prefer this over the 18mm f1.8 prime lens because it's far more versatile. When you're talking about those super wide angle lenses, you don't get as much background blur, say on an 18mm, as you would on a 35, for example. So between 18 and 20, which is this one right here on the wide end, there's not that much difference in the overall look. Sure, you'll get better low light performance out of the 18mm f1.8, but at 3.5, this is still almost as good, and having to crank the ISO up a couple of notches isn't the end of the world. It's not gonna drive up the noise that much. So I think this is a great buy. Let us know what you think. Thanks again for watching. Catch you soon. See ya.